Oh, hey, Alice. It's you. You walked in at a good time. We got John and Joseph. We're from Resistance House Band. Uh, yeah. Brian couldn't be here. He forgot.
Oh,
So
is that what it was?
yeah, that's his alibi because he forgot about it. That's okay though, because I'm gonna convince Brian to do another episode. Resistance House Band. You guys have an EP coming out on Halloween, digital release.
Yes.
Yep. And then you're doing a physical release at Springwater November 5th.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exciting. How long has it been since your last release?
So yeah, it's been a really long time. 2015 is the last time we put out anything that was like, really official. We had an EP called Revenge of the Scientists that came out back then, but that was that was not with Brian or with Joseph or anything. That was with Steven was the drummer at the time, and we didn't have a bassist back then. We were two piece, so like that's a very different band from what we are now.
How long has Resistance House Band operated under that name?
Yeah, so since I guess like summer of 2010.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so which I mean, like, granted that like that first round was just me, where like I had been trying to like form like some kind of alternative rock band, and it just wasn't working out. I couldn't get like a lineup going or anything, and I had started off writing songs about zombies as kind of like a palate cleanser between trying to write the songs I thought I was going to actually form a band with, and like at a certain point I realized like, oh, I've got like 6 of these and I can't get a lineup going. Like I should just start performing this. And so like initially it was like just me playing by myself, and it's like it grew kind of slowly at first, and took a couple years to start to really sound like what it is now, or anything even close to it. But
yeah. So did you grow up with music in the house?
Kind of. I mean, like my dad's played guitar for a really long time, and he used to play in like a cover band in DC that was like doing pretty well. Like they could play to a couple hundred people at like whatever venue they had residency at. So so I was surrounded with that a lot, of just like him always having guitars around, and we had a piano, and so like really early on, like that was my first instrument, was learning piano. That being said, my parents didn't really like project their musical interests onto me very much. Like in fact, it took me a long time to like find out my mom liked rock music. Like I had to like get into rock music independently before like there was any acknowledgement of like, oh, you like Nirvana? I've listened to Nirvana for a really long time. And it's like you could have fucking led with that.
Right.
Like yeah, I had to listen to a whole lot of shitty music and just have some bad taste for a while. And
so what would they play in the car? This is like, did they they listen to like, they don't want to show you the good shit, we're gonna put on some shitty stuff?
So they were pretty limited. Like the one thing that they listen to a lot is folk music.
Okay.
Where like they're big fans of like Roger McGuinn, and like that's the guitarist for the Byrds. And okay. He has a really cool project called the Folk Den Project, where like his whole thing is like preservation of songs that are at risk of being lost forever. It's like they're older obscure songs that like if nobody makes some new recordings of them, like there is a decent chance that like nobody's going to remember they exist, and like and they're not documented enough places to guarantee that that documentation is going to exist in perpetuity. And so like he's done a couple of those releases where like it's him collaborating with like a bunch of people to make sure there's new recordings of that. And like that's a lot of what I remember listening to growing up, is just like a ton of that stuff, which is really cool, but it's also a very like weird relationship with music compared to most people. It's like a lot of people are just like, yeah, my dad liked Zeppelin, so I like Zeppelin. It's like, and for me, like there's a lot less of an emphasis even on like a specific artist, because like the point was it's like the songs were really the highlight of it. And also like with way more exposure to like story songs than like that's something that's always stood out to me, is like I wonder if that contributed to coming up with a band like this, because a lot of folk music is telling stories, and like that's what this is telling stories.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, it wouldn't be obvious that that would have folk roots, maybe even to you.
Yeah,
but that's interesting.
Yeah,
yeah, it's like it almost is like a folk style, because you are telling it's very story driven.
Yeah,
what you do. I love, and like if you don't know Alice, they really put on a great show. Like every time I've seen them, they're like you've had bandages on, like
yeah.
like it's the house band during the zombie apocalypse, man. Check it out. So this is gonna feel random, but do you guys have any pets?
I know I live with 3 dogs, but
Okay.
none of them mine.
Yeah, I've got a cat named Hamlet that we adopted like a year ago. So that's
Nice.
it right now.
What's the cat look like?
Like tuxedo cat.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I have a black and white cat
Fancy.
too.
Yeah.
She's cow print.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, the black and white cats, they're like of similar varieties.
Yeah.
So
They're funny.
so this
animals.
This is
Yeah.
perfect. Do you just have one cat?
Mm-hmm.
And do you have any dogs?
No dogs.
Okay. So I just learned
Her name's
something very interesting, and I don't know how true this is. Okay, this is just something I heard, but I heard that cats have mind control parasites in their poop
Yes.
that gestate in people, and they make you love them.
Yeah, and they make
So-
you do also other weird things.
Such as,
What
are you doing with your cat, what is your cat making you do? I'm worried for you now.
There's this whole thing, and I might be talking about something else, but there's this thing where if you get it, it makes you like more of a risk taker in ways too. Have you heard about that? Like
No.
it affects people that way. Might be a different thing, but but what you're talking about, you said mind control parasites that make you love them. That's super interesting.
That's
I
yeah.
can
I mean,
almost feel that happening.
like it made me start thinking about Egypt and like how they worship cats.
Oh, dude, that's a good point.
I don't know, man. Now I'm all sus about cats now. I love
They're
see, I
interesting
love
animals.
cats, and I've been around cats a lot. I'm very much a cat person, and I'm like, how much of that is my free will, or how much of that is cat mind control?
How much
Or-
does it matter if it's your free will?
Oh,
I guess
That's a
not,
good
because I
question.
love cats either way.
Yeah, yeah.
Good point. Good point. It doesn't really matter, I guess.
do you know
I'm already
cats,
subject to it.
Cats
so.
die after sex. The one that I fucked.
I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming. Well,
I think I've already used that joke on this podcast at some point. Not about cats, but
something else.
something else.
Yeah.
Was it funny the first time?
No, it's never funny. Especially when I do it at shows. It bombs every single time.
From stage.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great.
when it's the
That's a
best.
great one.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, about your cats with the mind control
Oh no, that
devices.
was it. I just
Okay.
I heard that, and it's ever since it was like 2 or 3 days ago, I guess, and I've just been thinking about it a lot. Do you guys
That's
think? Do you guys
Do you
think
guys
you actually
think?
love your cats?
I like to think so. She's sweet and cute, but she is a pain in the ass a lot of times. What about you, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, like, I mean, like, I like animals a lot, and I want to give Hamlet a good life, but like, I do think like my wife is definitely the one who's like just who just adores Hamlet. I'm the one who like has to be a stern parent about him. So like, yeah, I feel like I'm not as like blinded by him, so I'm probably not actually having stuff gestate quite as much.
Yeah. You're immune to the cat. You just love it by just because.
Yeah, I feel like I was a teacher for years, and I feel like I feel like I have a teacher relationship with Hamlet of like like we're gonna be cool as long as you're doing the right thing, but like also I expect you to do this right, and he has to relearn that every single day. So
What did you teach?
So all 5 years I taught English as a second language mostly at the 5th grade level. There's a couple exceptions to that, but like every year I was definitely teaching 5th grade. It was just a question of was there an extra grade level that got thrown in there or something. But
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so mostly mostly kids who speak Spanish. Occasionally like Arabic and Kurdish and Mandarin, and some like more obscure ones as well. But yeah,
That's
doing
awesome.
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Hard segue. Not that that's not interesting.
No, go for it. What do you got?
It's cold as ice.
Okay, so what would like I guess the best way for me to put this, I'm gonna give you two options, I guess. It's zombie apocalypse time. Do you want the katana or the baseball bat? Let's start with Joseph. 5 seconds on the clock. Just kidding.
I've got no training with the katana, so I'm gonna go for the baseball bat.
Did you play baseball ever?
I played 1 season of baseball and I was dog shit at it.
But that's still more training than none, right? Yeah.
But I feel more confident in my ability to just hit something with a blunt object than to use a technique with a sword that's not going to end in me getting stabbed in the face.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely leaning towards baseball bat. My thought is that katana won't stay sharp forever, and also has the ability to get stuck in a way that baseball bat wouldn't. Also, I have beaten up at least like a fake zombie with a baseball bat before. There's a show that we made like a life-size zombie corpse and strung them up from the rafters, and at the end of our set,
Oh, that's cool.
we just bashed it with
Nice.
baseball bats.
So you have a little bit of experience.
Yeah, more experience with that than I do hitting things with a katana. So
okay, so I phrased the same question to you guys.
Okay. I initially thought katana, but they brought up really good points about the baseball bat. I gotta say, especially the part getting stuck. I didn't even think about that. Like a baseball bat definitely wouldn't. So I can be swayed. I'll change mine to baseball bat. I'll say baseball bat. And then if it breaks, then you have a sharp object probably to stab with.
You could also just put nails in it if you want to.
Oh, you could do that and be like the dude.
Oh yeah, the zombie dude. Yeah,
the zombie dude.
Yeah,
Y'all know that? Everyone knew what I was talking about.
Immediately. Phil.
Yeah, that is obvious choice.
Yeah, that was also well, that was unanimous. Yeah. So like, there's 5 baseball bats and 5 katanas. All katanas are getting left behind.
Because we all know anything about zombies. Like, only someone who doesn't know anything about fighting zombies would pick the katana.
So would you rather have a gun or a bow?
A bow.
Yeah.
You can make arrows a lot easier than you're going to be able to make bullets.
It's also quieter if you're trying to pick off one at a time.
Depends on the gun. Because I feel like if you're giving me like a pistol or something, I'm gonna go with the bow. But if I had a shotgun and enough ammo where I can't aim for shit, but that's a nice thing about a shotgun.
Right?
Yeah, true. Yeah, I think ammunition's the thing, right? It's like you said, and then there's also stealth. Yeah, I think a bow, it's like, I don't know. In that setting, I think there's a lot more practicality to it. Mm-hmm. What do you guys think is ultimately going to kill people, or do you think we're not? Do you think we're just going to spread out and infect the world or the universe?
I mean, like what? Sorry, do you mean like
in the human race?
Like what do we think is realistically actually going to?
Yeah, not zombies, but
yeah,
not that.
Well, it could be zombies. I mean, that's.
Yeah,
I suppose.
I mean, I don't know. I'm inclined to.
It could be like some Resident Evil shit, I suppose. Like some bioterrorism stuff.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm inclined to think like, I mean, either just like such complete degradation of the environment that like it just completely inhibits our ability to function the way we've ever historically functioned, or nuclear warfare, or the two that, like, if it's going to end, I feel like it's going to be one of those 2 ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I try to be optimistic, but things just don't seem. It's hard. It's hard to be optimistic.
Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, Alex, we talked about this a little bit last time, and I mean, clearly there are too many fucking people And I think in a lot of ways we are destroying ourselves. I think I'm more inclined though to believe that we're not necessarily headed to just one exact end as much as we're going to reach a capacity for our species, and we'll have to kind of be weaned down to a more sustainable level over time.
Okay, so that sounds like a path forward then. Do you think that could save us? Do you think it's long enough for us to like gestate the rest of the universe?
It'll save some of us.
Okay.
We're not all making it.
Yeah, true.
I mean, I can't help but think that, like, you know, with what we've experienced recently with COVID, like, I feel like that's been really telling for how anything in the future might play out, because I feel like that we saw very clearly that there's some people who like take in the new information and are kind of like, okay, we're going to change how we approach things to accommodate the fact that we have this new very difficult thing to grapple with. There are also people who will go to really great lengths to enable themselves to not grapple with that. That, like, you know, there's a lot of people I think are genuinely afraid. Like, I mean, I don't think that anybody who like outright denies this is I don't think it's as simple as they're just idiots, but that, like, I think they handle the stress and the fear and the uncertainty in a very different way. And I think that ignoring the fact that there are new concerns to grapple with is ultimately not a good survival strategy. And I while I would love to think that the next time we have something of similar magnitude that people will be better about it, I think what we've seen is that there's some people who are just not very well equipped for that, and that the next one's not necessarily going to go any better than this one did. And I think COVID's been really tricky in that, like, a lot of the people who deny it don't end up being the ones who pay the price for it. But there's no guarantee that the next time we run into something like that, that it's still going to have that same level of protection, that, like, the people who don't take it seriously are in any way insulated from the consequences. Like, there could be something down the line that, like, you know, I mean, not that I think this is going to happen, but like, if zombies happen, like, whoever says like zombies aren't real, I'm going to go hang out, is fucked. Like, that will have instant negative consequences for them as a result of their actions. And I feel like there may be certain scenarios like that if any new catastrophe occurs, those same people who approach COVID the way they did might not fare as well in new situations. So that may result in some weeding out at a certain point. And hopefully people learn. And, you know, just because somebody didn't navigate this first thing when it's really new and scary, well, I mean, that doesn't mean they won't do better in the future. But I think some people will continue to make poor choices each time they're faced with this, and that some people may just not be able to grapple with it.
Yeah, I can see that. It's you've seen Idiocracy?
Yeah, once. It's been a little while.
Like,
yeah,
a foreshadowing of that.
It sticks out. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have any, like, do you think people evolve naturally, or do you think there's some kind of missing link in how we came to be?
I mean, like,
when I say missing link, so examples I would point to would be something like a stone ape theory, like monkeys took mushrooms, or like a early hominid took mushrooms.
so
Or like the insemination thing, where like aliens.
Yeah, or like alien intervention of some kind.
Like, yeah.
So
or like part alien or some shit.
Does something seem more likely to you?
So I was originally an anthropology major, and I think that's maybe dictated my answer already, because like I definitely spent a lot of time with like just kind of the progression of human evolution, and I feel like it's compelling, like, as it is.
I do have a question. Not that I don't know, but for the
obviously.
audience members, what exactly is anthropology?
Yeah.
So,
just to
Yeah,
clear
for
the
the
air on
audience,
that.
right?
Yeah.
I know,
So-
in case anybody.
so, I mean,
lesser
base-
intelligence on the line.
like, I mean, basically, like, literally the study of humanity. So originally when I went to undergrad, my goal was to be an archaeologist, and that's one of the four. There are four kind of subcategories of anthropology, and they all basically come down to just the study of humans as its own kind of scientific pursuit. So archaeology is one facet of it. There's linguistic anthropology, studying the evolution of language and how do we develop language to communicate, which can include like the evolutionary process of language, but then also like how do our brains enable us to use language so well when so many other organisms cannot do that.
Right.
The other two are cultural anthropology, which is pretty self-explanatory, literally just study of culture. How is it disseminated? How do people interact with ideas surrounding culture, that kind of stuff. And then there's biological anthropology, which is that literal study of how did humanity come to the point that we are now? What were the steps along the way? I don't feel as much of an expert on biological, because like it's one of those, like, I took the core classes, but like archaeology was what I was going for on it. But there was some like mandatory coursework on it that I mean, like I think I felt like the more I was learning about it, the more I was like, oh, I see why they think this. And it did start to feel like very convincing, and like, of just like any issue of a missing link started to feel not like there was something that needed to have happened there, but just the fact that that's just the reality of what the archaeological record is.
So I know you said you didn't specifically study biological anthropology, but do you remember anything, to the best of your ability, can you help me understand maybe what those steps were to get us there?
I mean, so it basically just comes down to a point of divergence, very long time ago. I don't want to say a specific year total because I feel like I'm going to get that totally wrong, but like where, we know that we share a large amount of DNA in common with chimpanzees, and that apes specifically are the most similar to humans when we look at that. And so that very, very long time ago, there was a point of divergence where conditions started to favor some of the qualities that humans have versus what a lot of other apes at the time possessed. Things like an upright structure, and walking as a bipedal organism started to be more valuable than remaining on all fours. That something about the conditions made it that anybody who could get taller had a better chance of staying alive longer and reproducing more and contributing more of their genes than anybody else did.
Do you have any ideas about what the conditions might have been? Because I'm sorry, I just want to say
no, that's
so the thing that I have a hard time wrapping my head around with that idea is I don't see how like natural selection or evolution would account for consciousness, because I don't see how consciousness has any immediate benefits to your survival. It kind of seems to me like we waste a lot of our time with it.
That's
like
true.
now there are
That's
long-term benefits,
counterproductive.
right?
It
But
really
I don't
is. It
see how
does,
natural
you know?
selection could possibly know that. That
So-
seems like a big. I mean, and maybe I'm just not putting
That's kind of
pieces
a
together.
funny way of
but-
putting it.
So I think that maybe the issue with that is that like comes down to a question of like, for these intermediate steps between that common ancestor that we shared with apes versus, and then all the species going from that line to us, because there are stepping stones that are not human but are working their way towards that.
Oh,
how
okay,
many of those would you consider to have consciousness
That's
the
a
way that
fair
we do
point.
now? What I think it is more that I'm not sure that consciousness really means anything more than just that our brains have hit a certain level of capacity where like we can afford a certain level of frivolity that is not necessary for survival anymore. It's just a thing our brain is capable of doing while still more easily meeting the needs of our survival.
Maybe it's because we needed to socialize better.
It could be.
And
I mean,
communicate better.
I think, yeah.
Social awareness being a thing.
Yeah. Maybe that's why we develop a bigger brain.
Maybe consciousness is important for social awareness.
Yeah,
interesting.
And maybe
because you make a really good point that other animals seem to show a lot of what we would consider like sapience, self-awareness, like thinking.
Octopus.
Yeah, dolphins, like some primates. It's like, yeah, I didn't think about it like that. Okay, so
what's something interesting to me, just because to touch on that point, is how pets can emulate that in a way that, like, so dolphins and octopuses.
I think it is. I think it is.
Is it that?
It's not octopi. I know
it's
that.
not octopi. I remember hearing that somewhere. That's wrong. It's a
that's a made up thing that sounded good. It's not that.
Right. But yeah, either way. So like those, like maybe the dolphins and them actually do have consciousness, but it's interesting that pets can emulate it so that we think that they do.
I think dogs are pretty self-aware.
Even though that, but there's arguments that they're not. There's arguments that they are. There's arguments that we're not too.
True.
But right. That's one of those things though, where like, I mean, I feel like that maybe is an indicator of us seeing not full scale evolution, but at least like a very microscopic aspect of that, of like, I think there is some selection pressure that like, if you're an animal that can emulate a human trait, that means that a human is more likely to want to keep you around and adopt you. And I do think that at this point there may have been some pressure to keep those genes active for creatures that could mimic humans a little bit.
Which you could also call a social awareness. So maybe it is a consciousness or a form of it at least.
Yeah, I mean like a kind of a rudiment, like a building block of it.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because that would mean it would evolve a specific kind of consciousness that's like interacting with people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which isn't that what meowing is?
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah, you're right.
Back to cat mind control.
They only meow at humans.
Yep.
Oh my god.
Which I've always found super interesting.
Cats are freaking me out, man.
Because it imitates a baby's cry.
Mm-hmm.
It's the closest thing they can.
It's the closest frequency, yeah, something like that. Did you watch that? There's a thing on Netflix that came out recently. It's about cats.
Yeah.
There's probably a bunch of things, but there's one that came out recently.
No, yeah.
And I think it said that exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's super interesting.
Like a documentary?
Yeah.
Okay. So that being said, do you think extraterrestrial life has interacted with Earth at all? I used to ask people if they believed in extraterrestrial life, but that's unanimously there's life out there, obviously.
Yeah, I mean that's so. I mean, so I guess my thought is like, I mean, I would never say confidently like, yeah. I'm definitely the kind of guy like I'm okay with like not having a firm stance on something I really don't know, but like one thing that does stand out to me though, and I've always found this very funny, that like the Pentagon like outright admitted like very early in pandemic, like, hey, there were some UFO encounters and we really don't know what they are.
Yep.
But everybody's like, cool, we're all about to die, we don't fucking care. Like, and just like no one talks about that. And like, you know, like, but also like I get it because I also don't care. Because it was just like so low on my list of priorities and it never caught up. But I mean that might have been something.
What is the meaning of life?
Joseph is the meaning of life. Damn.
Thank you. Yeah.
We've all been looking for it. We've all been.
I've been right here this whole time. I don't know why you guys didn't recognize. The meaning of life is to play in a zombie rock band.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
And then go home and drink beer and play Spyro the Dragon.
You're doing it, bro.
Spyro.
If you want anything more than that, then you're just kind of a dickhead.
So you're basically Buddha. You have fulfilled achievement.
I'm working on it.
Most people aren't aware that Buddha was a huge Spyro fan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, true.
I really do like Spyro. Did you play the Reignited trilogy?
I did.
I have.
Hell yeah. I platinumed every game. I was super like into it when it came back out. I love me some Spyro. I could see like some of the early working, like, because it's Insomniac, it's the guys that made the Spider-Man game that came out. And it's funny, I could just see some of those early workings, some of those puzzles that they put in that game. That's like in the new Spider-Man game.
Yeah.
It's like you can tell. There's like pieces of it you can definitely tell. It's like these are the same folks.
You played anything recently?
Yeah. The new Horizon Forbidden West game.
How was it?
Amazing.
Nice.
It's a bit much.
I've never
There's a lot of mechanics, but it's a good game.
I never finished Zero Dawn, yeah, that one. But
yeah,
I really, really liked it.
Yeah,
that was
super
great.
Cool. Yeah, so Forbidden West is obviously it's very similar gameplay, but expands on some of that. So that's why I mean, like, I feel like they struck a really good balance with Zero Dawn, and this one's a bit much, but once you get like used to it, it's better. But it takes a minute.
I got stuck in that game a lot. Like Horizon was really hard for me.
It's a hard game.
Yeah. What about you guys? Playing anything recently besides Spyro?
I have played some of Zero Dawn recently.
Do you like it?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I'm still like I took a break from it for a second, but I definitely am gonna get back to it. A couple like indie kind of like horror unsettling, like Oxenfree is real good.
I heard about that game.
That's excellent. I would like. It's a hard one to talk about without spoiling. But it's a very very well crafted storyline, and it has really remarkable replay value in that like replaying it feels like you're still playing the first game. Like it has narrative significance to start it over, which is a really clever way to approach that.
Interesting.
It's hard for I feel like it's hard for developers to do that, to get a good replayability. So I really respect it when you see it in the game.
Yeah, that's really good. What have you played?
Spyro the Dragon. No, wait, you said not that.
Spyro 1,
You're like
Spyro 2, Spyro 3.
The bad PS2 ones, right?
Yeah.
Game Boy Advance Edition.
I played recently all the way through a game called Dusk, which is basically kind of like a Doom ripoff, but came out in 2018. And it's very cool because it's like take like 1993 Doom, but then make it actually make sense to release today. And that's what that game is.
Nice.
It's same like graphics though, like the
but
that's awesome.
But the mechanics, and there's like a lot of like mechanical and like quality of life kind of improvements that
quality of life.
Yeah, we've come to expect more from our entertainment since 1993. But back on Horizon Zero Dawn, I don't like that game.
Yeah.
I tried it. It's
cold as ice.
I don't. You know what? I think there's something to be said about making a game that's like doing one thing really well, instead of like, oh, every game has to have crafting in it because Minecraft was popular, right? Like the kids on Twitch are always playing Minecraft, so you gotta make your own eras, obviously. That'll satisfy everyone's ADD brains. I honestly, like, I get why some people like that, but like I would rather more games just ditch the whole, we have this gigantic open world you can explore and it's all fucking boring.
There's giant robot dinosaurs. What are you talking about?
I do feel you. There's a lot of open world games are like that. And it's annoying, especially any Ubisoft game that comes out. My gosh, they pump them out. Horizon Zero Dawn's pretty dense comparatively, but I definitely feel you. Especially at like Far Cry games. That's a Ubisoft game.
I fucking love Far Cry.
I do love Far Cry, but it's one of those where the vast open world is mostly just boring.
I take that back. I don't run Far Cry after Far Cry 3 or 4.
I don't know. The Far Cry about the religious hillbillies was pretty good.
Well,
yeah.
I can't comment on that one. I haven't played it.
I felt the environment was kind of familiar too, because it's set like in a rural area.
It's in hillbilly country.
Yeah. I'm from East Tennessee.
I went on a like a company trip with the company I work for, and they took us out to Williamsport, Tennessee. And they rented a bunch of off-road vehicles, like they're called side-by-sides. They're kind of like dune buggies, I guess.
Yeah.
And we went. Here's the thing: this rental place doesn't have their own private property, so we went through Tennessee back roads for like 80 miles. Like just through, like, have you ever been like in those, out in the sticks, those roads that just not even gravel, just dirt. And then they'll just go off into like, okay, well, that's not at all drivable or hardly walkable. Well, it's like there's hundreds of miles of that out there.
Yeah.
And they just take people on tours, and it's fucking sick. It was actually fucking awesome.
Nice.
Now imagine that, but you're out in the middle of nowhere, and then you get captured by some cultists, and they put you up on a meat hook, and then they accidentally resurrect you, and then all of a sudden you have to kill all the cultists, and that's dusk.
Oh shit. Okay, gotcha.
You talked about Doom. I feel like they're pretty good at taking one thing and making it pretty good. It specifically, I'm talking about Doom Eternal. I thought that was a great game. Cool. The shooting mechanic, and it's not necessarily just one thing, but it's one of those things where it's like there's plenty of games that shoot and do all this other stuff, but Doom, it's like it's all about that fighting mechanic. That's what the game is built upon, really.
Yeah, I would rather something do one thing really well. Than try to do a bunch of stuff kind of mediocre.
I really liked Doom Eternal for that. That was a great game.
Do you have any thoughts about the afterlife? Or if there is one?
Or the lack thereof.
So let me actually like not ask you a shitty
hard
question.
Segue.
Like
that's not a shitty question.
Let me phrase that in a way that's not terrible. Do you have any preconceptions about death and what comes after?
So I mean, I feel like it's often kind of surprising, like especially given like what a cynical like thing I write music about. Like I am Christian. Like I grew up like really immersed in that. My dad's a preacher. Like I have.
What denomination, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, so he was Cumberland Presbyterian, but like it was one of those things like that's what he got a job in. Like I feel like I had the benefit that like my parents are not fundamentalists in any way whatsoever. And because of that, like we've grown up like with a fairly like reasonable kind of view on some things, whereas like denominations are not football teams. Like you don't have to pick one and like, live and die by that. Sure. Like, it's okay to have some difference in opinion on some things. And that doesn't negate whether like the overall church is one that's doing good or not doing good.
Well, I think denominations actually completely defeat the purpose, right? Because it's like it should be a conversation. It shouldn't be a dictation about what this means.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like, and that's something that like I feel like I'm in a weird spot with that because like basically I think I am by default an agnostic. Like I would like. The only reason I'm still Christian is because I had like one thing I can't tell myself didn't happen that like makes me hold on to that. It's.
Do you want to tell us about it?
I mean, I can.
I'd love to hear about it.
So when I was 13, my dad's church, which this was like the first year that like he had been a preacher. He was in seminary when I was in elementary and part of middle school. The first year that we went out, we were outside of Clarksville. We'd moved there for him to take that church, and we went on a mission trip. And the mission trip is not anything overwhelmingly exciting. It's essentially going into Appalachian Mountains and like partnering with some church that doesn't have a whole lot of funds to help them put on a vacation Bible school. The cynic inside me like is well aware that vacation Bible schools are not particularly helpful to anybody. That like it's if it turns out that we are totally wrong and Christianity has no bearing on anything, VBS on its own did not make anybody's lives better. One of the good things that we did do though is that like we made sure to like also emphasize a lot of kind of community partnership and like cleanup and stuff. And so we were partnering with this church, but we were actually set up in a local, what used to be a school. It was abandoned, but like it kind of like been it was sometimes used as an event center, but also it wasn't well maintained. So like when we got there, like, broken glass everywhere, like cleaning out like dead animals, like, really not safe place for people. And we're working on that, and and then on top of that, trying to like, do these like, Bible classes and stuff at the same time. Traditionally with that approach to, like, a lot of churches, when they do vacation Bible schools, they try to get in some kind of altar call. Usually towards the end of it, once like there's been some level of teaching that's occurred. And it's always traditional to do that on Fridays. Just the last day, you just kind of like you learned a little bit about what this is. If you want to join, great. On Wednesday, we were back at kind of our home base. We were at Lincoln Memorial University, where like a whole bunch of these churches would stay in the dorms, and until they would all spread out in their different directions. And I was hanging out. I mean, I was a 13-year-old on a college campus with no one there. Like most of the time, we were just like going to the gym or like just exploring and like seeing, this campus or whatever. And I was walking. I was near my friends, and we were just hanging out. And the best I can describe it is like, if you've ever read an X-Men comic, when like Charles Xavier is like sending a message telepathically, I heard in my head, you have to ask them on Thursday. And like, I cannot possibly stress enough how little that was my own voice. It felt so intrusive. It just felt just so completely foreign and incomprehensible, and it felt like somebody had taken over my brain. And I felt that, and I felt this overwhelming incomprehension that I had just experienced something that people aren't really supposed to experience. And I started crying, like on the spot. And I went and found my dad, and he thought I was having just like a breakdown. Like he didn't understand what was happening at first. And then I told him, and what I told him ended up being very similar to something that he had also experienced when he was younger. When that was kind of a similar thing of like something that didn't feel right, that didn't feel normal, and that when taken in assessment of what every experience leading up to that had been, that this was something different. And I talked to him about it. There was a couple other churches we were partnered with, and he talked to their pastors, and he said, like, look, I don't pretend to have any understanding of what's going on, but it feels like after everything we studied and every scriptural passage where in scripture God does frequently appear and talk to people, and also often leaves people with this similar overwhelmed kind of state, that it feels like if we ignore this, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And because of that, we did do the altar call on Thursday.
It would be a very wild thing to just write off.
Yeah.
Like what the fuck? Yeah.
And so we did the altar call on Thursday, and I was the one who ended up doing it, because they said, you know what, if the message was meant for us, it would have come to us. And something like 21 kids came up for that, as like we're going to profess our faith, and like people have different opinions on whether that, if it's really a one or done, like I said it once, I'm good or not. I have no idea. I'm not God. I have no idea what the rules are for that. And one thing that I very deeply regret, that as a 13-year-old I did not have the foresight to do, is check and see if a single one of those kids didn't show up on Friday. I really wish I had. Because I have no idea why that could possibly matter. Instinctively, my thought is like, why would it? And I mean, yeah, this was a church that was struggling, didn't have large attendance, but like, there's nowhere in America where you can't get to a church, and that place is no exception. Like, and so part of me feels really skeptical about that, but I also know I never felt that way ever again. I have insane levels of stress tolerance. I mean, I taught in a middle school in Antioch for 5 years and never broke down the way I did on a Wednesday on a mission trip that's largely a vacation for most people. Like, and I really wanted to experience that again. That was not the last mission trip I did. And there would be times where I would pray desperately. Like, one thing I found is that, I was very new to being a preacher's kid at that point. I hated that. I learned so many horrible things about people who are professing Christians and who show up every Sunday and act like they're good people, and they are fucking monsters in real life. And knowing that at 14 years old and having a front row seat to knowing who in your church is a pedophile, who in your church is beating their wife, who is so fucked up on alcohol all the time, which people defrauded the church and abused their charity and then fucking bought themselves new shit instead of taking care of their kids. Like, the rest of my experience as a preacher's kid always made me like the church less. The only reason I cannot give up on it is because I have to make that decision of like, did I go crazy? Because I know I felt that. And sometimes I wonder at this point, like, did the altar call matter, or is it just that I needed something to hold on to? Because I would have 100% given up my faith at this point, just based off of just the entire rest of the history of being at that church. Had so few silver linings to it that like I would have happily, and like I said, I mean, like, if it weren't for that, I would have, I mean, I still don't feel comfortable telling anybody what to believe. Like, if I'm the only Christian in here, like I 100% respect that.
No, so I don't want to interrupt you, but I can relate to some of what, but I'm going to.
No, it's okay.
I don't want to, but I'm going to anyway. Yeah. I can relate to some of what you're saying. I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, third generation.
Yeah.
And both my granddads were, well, one of my granddads was a presiding overseer, which means he wasn't just one of the elders, he was like the presiding elder. And then my other granddad was just an elder in his congregation. And then one of my uncles was also, so it's like third generation, like long family of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
And the hypocrisy, the things that go on and get covered up.
Yeah. That's a big part of it.
Fully aware that these things are happening and not reporting them to the police.
Yeah.
That is what not only Jehovah's Witnesses do, that's what a lot of, not all, obviously. Well, I mean, who knows, maybe. I guess that's not obvious necessarily. I'm not saying that all denominations of religion, not just Christianity, but religion do that. Yeah, but certainly many do.
I would be very surprised if there's any denomination where that's never happened, at least at the local church level.
I mean, from an organizational standpoint, from an organizational standpoint, it makes sense that you don't want that to get out about your organization from a preservation point of view.
Yeah,
but it's also just really fucked up ethically.
Right. Sorry. The thing I was saying is that all religions and all denominations and everything contain people, and people are shitty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're going to do shitty things. You can't really blame that on your religion.
Yeah.
Or like say it's God's fault, or well, that's a different argument. You can't say that it's Christianity's fault that Christians are shitty.
Yeah.
People are shitty.
No,
I've always like, sometimes people will like ask me about, kind of preacher's kid kind of growing up stuff. And I think a lot of times, like, I'm not the stereotype of what they think like that turns into. And like, what I found is that for people for people who are willing to like engage with the reality of what Christianity is, you know, people who don't bury their heads in the sand about it, you've only got you've got a couple choices. You can lose faith in God, or you can lose faith in people, but you can't have both of those intact by the time you get through it. And
that's deep.
I definitely lost faith in people specifically. At the same time, you know, without that one experience, I would have lost faith in God as well. But yeah, it's I don't know. I don't know why.
So to travel back just a little bit, what is the afterlife look like to you? What is that? What more specifically, what do you think happens after people die?
I mean, I think because
it's like I guess what I'm saying is obviously it's not as simple as like I'm a Christian, right?
Yeah. So like I said, I'm somebody who's okay with admitting like anything I say is going to be a guess.
Yeah. You know, so to be perfectly clear,
yeah.
One thing I really like about this question is nobody fucking knows.
Yeah.
I know as much about this as anybody else in the world, and everybody else knows just as much about this as anyone else.
Yeah. I guess my ideal would be that there is a heaven. If Christianity turns out to be right, I don't think there's a pathway where heaven doesn't exist. Something I am on the fence about. My wife is Catholic, and I have not joined the Catholic Church, but I also, if there's one thing that's very telling that like any kind of Protestant upbringing like didn't take very strongly, it's the fact that like I don't automatically think Catholics are wrong about everything that they have that's, you know, different. And one thing, like, I personally take a lot of comfort in the idea of a purgatory existing, because I do know that there are people who I think, despite having lost faith in a lot of people, I do know that there are some people who are trying really hard to be good. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they said that Jesus was their Lord and Savior, but I do have a really hard time wrapping my head around the idea of eternal damnation for people who tried to be good. And I would sincerely hope that that is not the case. And I think that purgatory is that is a concept that helps alleviate that issue a little bit. And so
yeah, like
it's still pretty unfair, but I guess it's better than sending them
as well. You know, if you think about it, there's plenty of deterrence in scripture. Like, let's look at the Old Testament, right? It's like you have who was the prophet that went up? Go up, you bald head.
Moses.
Phil, you remember?
What are you talking about?
Elijah. Yeah. So the prophet Elijah was going up to the temple, and 42 children run up to him, and they're mocking him. Old man.
Oh yeah.
Go up.
They get eaten by the bear.
Yeah. So when he gets up there, he makes an offering to God and prays, and God sends 2 bears from the woods to maul these 42 children.
So is this a real story?
Yes, but here's the thing: ancient Jews knew that was a fucking story.
No, that really happened, bro.
That's what's so frustrating. Is like it's only like the last 500 years that people think that actually happened, and it like, but
well, it's like how like Jonah too, right? Like
yeah,
like
exactly.
Like
there's so many of those. Job is my favorite example because who the fuck is telling the story?
Yeah,
who the fuck is? It's like God in heaven. Okay, but are you watching it? What?
Once upon a time, there was God.
I think there's an interesting idea that like I think you know, for people who are literalists, which like I think that's a kind of an insane way to look at scripture, but like they seem to think that like Jesus invented the parable. That he was just like, what if I told stories that helped explain ideas?
Oh yeah.
And they were just like, oh, like, that's a good invention. Jesus.
Like that's not what the entire Old Testament is.
Yeah. Where, you know, I think like, I mean, even like Garden of Eden, like, I mean, like I said, I happen to believe in the fossil record and evolution. To me, like Garden of Eden isn't necessarily the hill to die on.
You know, that's only and what's really frustrating is that's only recently a controversial view.
Yeah.
for you to have.
Yeah.
Ancient people knew that. This is an allegory for a deeper concept.
Right.
Yeah. Fuck, I had. Oh yeah, but I gave the example of the bears because it's like, yeah, that shit didn't happen, but it's something you tell your kids so they won't go in the fucking woods and break their leg.
Yeah.
And it's like that's what hell is. It's so you don't treat people like shit. And it's not. I don't know. I mean, you know, whatever your interpretation of it is, I'm not, you know, I don't have the absolute view on it. That's just what makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, I have no idea.
So you did mention that you believe in a heaven. Do you have a hard time wrapping your head around a hell? A purgatory seems nice to you. That's kind of.
I mean, I'm okay with the idea of a hell, like, because I do think there are people who earn their spot. Like, I mean, you know, it like I like. I mean, my struggles really just come down to like the fact that like every part of me feels like when I die, like there's going to be nothing, but then that experience kind of forces me into a pathway where like where there would likely be an afterlife. You know, I feel like it would be very weird if like if it turned out some other religion was right and they were like, we're going to force him to have like a supernatural experience, but we're not going to actually put him in the right path. Like, you know, that would just like, thanks Buddha, like you could have mentioned, like, you know, so
sorry man.
Yeah. Yeah, where were you?
Too busy playing Spyro.
Yeah. Deep in enlightenment with my Spyro.
Enlightenment, right?
But you know,
enlighten those motherfuckers up. I'm right.
Enlighten them up.
But you know, I do think that there are people out there who do have a very full awareness of what the right thing to do is, and outright consciously reject that.
Yeah,
I have far less of an issue with somebody not being swayed by Christianity, especially given what a bad PR job actual Christians do on it.
Yeah.
But when I see somebody who you know intentionally withholds help from other people and who understands the impact that their decisions are going to have on other people and accept that as acceptable collateral damage because it makes better sense for them, somebody like that, I mean, I if hell exists for people like that, I feel like that's okay. I'm open to the idea of forgiveness and personal growth, but there are a lot of people, and especially people in power. You know, I think about, you know, there is that that line where rich man asks Jesus, you know, what do I need to do to get into heaven? I've kept all the commandments. Jesus says, you know, give away your possessions and follow me. And when the man expresses sadness because he has all this stuff, Jesus, you know, says, you know, if it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get into heaven. And we see the corruption and the indifference to human suffering that a lot of people with tons of power and influence and wealth hold, and the pure unapologetic outlook that a certain level of human suffering is acceptable. And there are a lot of those people who never show any remorse, who never do anything to make up for the damage that they cause, and then they die. And if there is an afterlife, and if there is any level of evaluation that goes into where you end up in the afterlife, I can't imagine the argument for them going anywhere else.
I just recently got into Zoroastrianism.
Yeah,
learned a little bit about this, very little. Are you familiar?
Not enough to not get a rundown.
Yeah, so Mesopotamian predates Judaism. It's the concept is you have a being of pure light and a being of pure evil, creation, darkness, yin yang, and they're eternally separate. We could call it heaven and hell. And then the creator makes a middle ground physical realm, knowing that the evil one will enter it and corrupt it, with the sole purpose of being kind to him and teaching him love so that he'll stop being evil and integrate it. So I think I don't know how true that is literally, but I find a lot of truth in that, at least personally. The point of life for me, at least in part, a big part of it is to be kind to people that don't deserve it. On top of that, I think I had a kind of vision quest of my own where I saw I was shown that the universe, I was in an altered state of mind, but I was shown that the universe in the beginning is kind of woke up to itself, and created life so it wasn't alone. It could pretend it wasn't alone anymore. So it goes down and enters that thing. And so I think we're all the same person. We're all God made flesh. And what makes us different is our biology and the things we go through in life. I think I think there's some truth to both of these concepts I've just thrown at you, and I'm kind of like integrating them into my own idea. So I think that's kind of where I'm coming from it at. This is kind of also really new philosophy for me. So I guess that's the reason I bring it up is that's kind of how I'm wrapping my head around a concept of hell. Is that's just where evil comes from. And so also if you have this idea of good being kind to evil unnecessarily to integrate it, you could also have a pushback, right? So you have evil corrupting goodness and dragging it to hell with it. So maybe that if you're bad, you get dragged down into the dark space rather than being brought into the light. Yeah, something like that, maybe.
Yeah, maybe so.
That was a rant.
No, it's
yeah. Unless the constant could be the constant balance, right?
Of the universe. Maybe it never fucking balance. Like maybe it's just in constant balance. Like they're two equally powerful.
There's
and we're
always
just stuck
pulling good
That's
from
what
the bad.
we are the
good.
equal balance of good and
But you know what?
Yeah, we're the in between. We're the medium.
We are demons and angels together.
Damn.
And it might look like that forever, but you know what? Maybe it's just because of how I was raised, but I feel apocalyptic, like things are about to go down.
I mean, I think that's a really prevalent sentiment right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like like there's something in the air, man, and there has been for years. It's like it's dense.
Yeah.
I've honestly felt that since I was a kid.
Yeah, like since 9/11.
And I still feel that way. I've continuously felt like it does feel like it is just fucking like ready to go down.
Yeah.
But
and
that's
like
been being preached for thousands.
You know,
that's
I bet every
right.
generation's felt that
being
way.
preached by somebody.
Right.
We're not the first generation that's felt that way.
Everybody's felt that way.
But you know what? There's probably there might be an argument that it's more true for us because we're at the very beginning of this technology boom. Like we've had cars for 200 years at max, not even 100.
That was like early 1900s when they started.
Okay, yeah, so 100 years basically. Internet for 30, 40, 50, something like that. And it's like
usable internet for most people is like in the mid 90s.
So like 30 some years maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then so like that's nothing.
I'm saying fuck because I'm like, damn, that was that long ago, wasn't it?
And that's nothing. That's nothing in the course of even just human history. And it's like we have no idea what the fuck's coming. And I don't know. I have a lot of anxiety about it. So it's good to talk to you guys. It's good to
it's talk to you guys about it all.
It's good to share my anxiety with you and make you dream.
Misery loves company.
I'm glad our apocalyptic zombie theme band makes people feel better. So.
Yeah, man. Yeah. You know, on that, like when I was 18, I moved out of my parents' house and got away from being a witness. And I immediately started going and sing live music, and you guys were one of the first bands that like I had seen and was like really blown away by. And I just want to say, like, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that like live music saved my life, because that replaced the church and the social setting. I was also homeschooled, so my entire social setting was my church. So when I left, like that became my new church. Mm-hmm. And there's something spiritual about what you guys do in live music, you know?
Well, thanks. Yeah. I mean, like,
it's really important.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, like, I think I don't know. It's a really cool thing to be doing, and like one thing that I really like about our band that I don't know that any other band that I could be doing would necessarily do is that like Resistance is supposed to be entertaining. That is like I mean, obviously, like what we just talked about, you know, there's a lot of like real anger and cynicism and stuff, and like it would be very easy to do a band that was entirely that all the time. And like when I write stuff outside of Resistance, like it is significantly less of a good time. Like I mean, you know, it's but Resistance is like always formatted like there might be songs that get more serious to drive, you know, certain story elements forward, but like it is fiction, it is storytelling, it is meant to be something fun for people like kind of lose themselves in a little bit and just get invested in a plot line just of fictional characters and have some jokes along the way, and you know, try to write some catchy melodies to go along with it. And it's like it's such a weird like obvious thing, but like I do think there are some bands that don't really have make a fun band be like part of their overall vision for it. You know, that it, you know, it can sometimes get lost in like the, you know, we gotta, you know, stay really heavy and deep, or, you know, like some people really over rely on like if it's personal, nobody can say it's bad. You know, that like
that's interesting.
That's like, you know, if it's real, obviously it's well written, which is obviously not the case, but I think that it can be a really defensive way to approach things. And there are a lot of, it's very easy to come up with a band where you can lose sight of the fact that like this should be a good time for the audience a lot of times. Like, you know, there is a place for just, you know, for doing some heavy and harder stuff, but like at the end of the day, like there's not a lot of fun in real life right now. And I think that you know, if you can do something that is going to be at least a little bit intentionally enjoyable, like that means something. And I think that like, because sometimes I think that we do run into musicians who are like, you know, just people who are like, why the hell are you doing this? Like I mean, you know, especially like anytime I've ever played a song not about zombies, for people they're just like, so why the fuck are you doing what you're doing? Like, you know, like you can write a song that's not that, like but at the end of the day it's like, well, I have an easier time figuring out how to make this fun for everybody.
I love what you guys do.
Talk about having fun being important. Sorry, Alex, but it drives me crazy when I see a band. I saw one recently, and the guy is shredding, absolutely shredding on the guitar, doing incredible stuff, but he looks bored as fuck. Yeah. So I was bored as fuck.
That was,
you know what I mean? But if he was just doing some of this and looked excited and was having a good time, everybody would have been into it. But he didn't. He was just like, he looked pissed. He looked like he really didn't want to be there.
It's called shoegaze. Stand there, look at your shoes.
Right. And it's like, I don't know, maybe you think you're too cool to be here. I don't know, but
it's Nashville.
If you're not having a good
cool
time, then we're not having a good time, you know? So I think that fun is important, and we try to implement that. And I love to see that in groups. So that's super cool.
Yeah, you guys are really good at performance art too.
We think that it's really important because it's like you said, man. It's like if you're not having a good time, what are you doing up there?
Yeah.
Why are you doing it?
I think it fits thematically too, because it's like it's the house band at the end of the world, basically. And it's like kind of like a metaphorical end of the world, but also literally because it's the end of the world.
That's actually fucking happening right now.
That's been such a challenge with like the last couple of years, is like, you know, how much do we want to lean into the fact that like a lot of our songs have they've either aged really well or really terribly. I mean, like, you know, we have a song called Quarantine. We have a song about crazy conspiracy theorists called Not So Crazy Now. Like, you know, we have a song called Thank the Scientists. Like, you know, there's a lot of stuff that like you could tell somebody we could tell somebody we wrote all of this post-COVID, and like people would absolutely believe. And you know, and like you start to kind of like ask yourself, like, okay, like on one hand, I mean, it's like kind of an elephant in the room, but it's like it's a little weird to like play and not acknowledge it, but also like we're very irreverent about the material and our music. Like, I mean, there's a lot of like self-deprecation and like humor baked into the fact that like this is, you know, like the content of what's being said is somewhat absurd. But then like now that it's so close to some like genuinely traumatic things that people experience, like how much do we want to, you know, poke at that? Or
it's a fine line.
Yeah. And I think like I feel like for a while when we did get back to playing shows again, like, you know, it felt like it felt like it was hard to come up with anything else to say other than that. And over time I'm like trying to move away from that, because it's like there's only so many times that like you can keep making the same jokes about that before it's just like, man, it's like it's not a good time anymore. But
that's the thing about jokes. If you tell it enough times, it starts getting boring, but then it comes full circle if you just keep saying it.
That's why Freebird's so fun. One of the only times I've been particularly rude to an audience member is because they asked for Freebird.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, he deserved it.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, this has been a great time.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing this. Alice, they've got the EP coming out digitally on Halloween, and then catch them November 5th at Springwater. Yeah. Do you have anything coming
up? Not other than the we're doing the Lincoln Park tribute show November 15th.
November 15th.
We'll be part of it. We're not doing it, but we'll be doing a couple of songs.
All you guys? Okay. Check
Plus,
Moonlight Drowns.
Andy.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know Andy.
But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, cool. Well, yeah, go do all that, Alice, and links below. Check them out. Bye.
Bye.